I still remember the exact moment. Everything changed between me and my housemate Levi. It was a Tuesday evening in late September, and a thunderstorm was rolling in over the plains, the kind that makes the whole world feel small and charged. The rain drummed on the tin roof of the old ranch Hans house we'd been sharing for 6 months. I was back from checking a fence line later than usual, my boots caked in mud, my denim jacket soaked through. I unlocked the front door, slipping off my wet coat and hanging it by the entryway. The familiar smell of the place hit me. Old cedar wood, the sharp tang of cheap coffee and quiet scent, something like worn leather, clean sweat, and the vast open air mingled with the chili I'd left simmering on the stove. I paused at the threshold of our small shared living room. The lights were dim, a single lamp casting long, soft shadows across the worn floorboards. That's when I heard it, a soft rustling, a subtle sound out of rhythm with the steady pounding rain. My heart skipped a beat. I knew Levi was home. His dusty Ford pickup was parked outside. Carefully I moved down the narrow hallway toward his bedroom. The noise grew louder now. Hitched breath, the shifting of bed sheets, a mix of curiosity and a strain. Protective panic churned in my chest. I knocked on his door quietly, then, getting no answer, pushed it open just a crack. What I saw made me stop dead in my tracks. Levi, shirtless, was curled over the edge of his bed, his hands hidden beneath the worn quilt. He was clearly pleasuring himself. For a moment I froze, my mind a complete blank. Then instinct took over. I slammed the door shut and stumbled back, my cheeks burning with a confusing heat. It was embarrassment, shock, and something else entirely unexpected. I didn't know what to feel. My voice was a low, trembling thing when I finally spoke through the wood. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I heard a sharp, startled movement inside. A few seconds later, the door opened. Levi stood there, his eyes wide with a profound, cornered shame. He'd pulled the quilt around his waist. It's fine, he mumbled. But the deep flush that crept up his neck betrayed him. He waved a hand awkwardly. Go back. I didn't go back. Something in me, a wave of concern mixed with that other unnamed feeling, kept me rooted to the spot. I closed the door again, leaning my back against it, my heart pounding against my ribs. After a few seconds, I said much quieter this time, do you want me to leave you alone? He hesitated. His voice, when it came, was barely audible. No, that single word, spoken in that moment with the storm raging outside and the dim light casting him in such a vulnerable light, changed everything. For the first time I saw him outside the usual stoic, quiet cowboy routine, beyond mending fences at dawn, sharing beers after a long day, or listening to old country music on the porch. I saw his desire, his need, his loneliness, and he saw me seeing him. I didn't leave. Instead, I turned and walked into his room, sitting down on the edge of a wooden chest about 6 ft away from his bed. The air was thick with unspoken things. The silence stretched, but neither of us fled. Are you okay? I asked. He looked at me, his chin tucked in, his arms wrapped around his knees over the quilt. Yeah, just surprised, I guess. His voice wavered. I thought I was alone. I'm sorry I intruded, I whispered. I didn't mean to. It's not your fault, he said, sitting up a little more, pulling the blanket tighter. Honestly, it's been a while since I've allowed myself to feel like this, to be like this. My heart clenched. I knew a version of Levi. He was quiet, guarded, a man who carried the immense weight of expectation from his family of ranchers, from the small conservative town we lived near, from the very idea of what a man like him was supposed to be. He never talked about relationships or attraction, not in the open way I sometimes did. He was tentative, careful, a fortress. I swallowed hard. If you want, I said, my voice soft, you don't have to do this alone. He looked at me as if I just spoken a foreign language, a half laugh escaping him. Alone, you mean with you here? Yes. My own voice shook for reasons I couldn't quite name. If that would help. He bit his lip, closing his eyes for a long moment. I was sure he would say no, would tell me to get out, but then he gave a barely perceptible nod. In that charged space, I offered my hand. May help. His eyes opened again, wide and Unsure, almost frightened, but underneath the fear, something tender flickered. Okay, he breathed. I moved forward slowly, my boots silent on the wooden floor. I had no script for this. No map. I placed my hand gently on the quilt, a light grounding touch near where his own hands were hidden, where he needed comfort most. I didn't cross any boundaries. Is this okay? I asked. My voice a whisper. He nodded again. Movement so slight I almost missed it. My heart thudded against my ribs. I held that moment suspended in the electric hush between us, the storm, distant symphony outside, our breathing. The only sound in the room. I leaned in closer, my voice barely there. Tell me what you want. He took a shaky breath. And under the warm glow of that low lamp, I helped him. It wasn't explicit or demanding, it was caring, gentle, guided entirely by his quiet words and respectful of every boundary. My heart was full of a strange, powerful mix of compassion, of desire, but mostly of this raw, fragile connection we had just forged. Later, when he pulled back, wrapping the blanket fully around himself, I stayed. He looked at me, really looked at me, his eyes moist and soft. Thank you, he said the word, small but heavy with meaning. Anytime, I replied, my voice thick. You don't have to hide. We sat like that for a long while. The rain softened to a steady patter. The lamp glowed. We didn't speak much more, but the energy between us had irrevocably shifted. I saw in him a courage I never knew he possessed, and I felt something in me shift too. This wasn't just about sharing a house anymore. This was affection. This was possibly something much more. My name is Rowan, by the way. When we'd first agreed to share the house, our arrangement was one of convenience. Levi was the quiet, stoic ranch hand. I was the photographer from the city, always sketching the landscapes, always trying to fill the silence. He'd tease me about being too dramatic with my art. I'd laugh and say he was just jealous of my soul. We were good housemates, but I never ever expected this. Over the next few days, we moved around each other with a new careful grace. There was a suspended moment in every glance. I'd catch Lee looking at me over his coffee mug. In the morning, a question in his eyes. I'd feel his hand brush mine, accidental, then maybe intentional. When we reached for the same tool in the barn, and we'd both freeze, a hard fluttering in my chest. At the same time, Levi seemed restless. He stayed out on the range longer. At night, I'd hear him turning over in his bed, the floorboards creaking. He looked distant in our shared kitchen, and I knew something was building inside him, just as it was inside me. One evening, I asked him if he wanted to watch a movie, just like old times. He hesitated, then agreed. We sat on the worn leather couch, and I draped a wool blanket over us both. The proximity both comforting and electric. The film played on the small screen, but neither of us was paying attention. I noticed his hand resting on the cushion near mine. I didn't move away. Instead, I gently laid my hand over his. He froze for a second, then his fingers curled slightly around mine. He didn't pull away. His breath was quick and shallow. He turned to me, his voice hushed. Rowan, I like you, Levi, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. More than just a friend. He looked shocked, his eyes wide in the flickering light from the television. Rain had started again, tapping against the windows. He picked up the corner of the blanket, fiddling with the frayed edge. I like you too, he said, his voice barely above the movie soundtrack. Relief washed over me immediately, followed by a pang of guilt. Was this too fast? Was I putting him under pressure? But he didn't look unhappy. He looked hopeful. We didn't kiss that night. Felt too soon, too overwhelming. But we held hands, and eventually he leaned in, resting his head on my shoulder. Inside, I wrestled with so many feelings. The fear that I'd misread everything, the shame mine his that hung in the air. We were housemates. What if this made everything awkward and strained? But underneath it all was a shimmering thread of hope, a thing I tried desperately not to cling to. Levi was wrestling with his own demons. He was raised in a home where feelings were liabilities, and being a man meant being tough, silent, and straight. He'd never admitted his attractions to anyone, not even himself, until that night I found He worried about rejection, about being judged by the men he worked with, about losing the only life he'd ever known. He worried that his desires were something to be ashamed of, yet under all that armor there was a profound longing for touch, for connection, for someone to accept him completely. The nights between us felt electric, our silence spoke volumes. I'd lie in my bed hearing the soft sound of his breathing from the next room. Sometimes I thought I heard him crying and I wanted to go to him to comfort him, but I worried that any intrusion would push him further away. One night I sketched two figures on horseback, silhouetted against a vast stormy sky. Reaching a hand out to one another, I taped it to our refrigerator. It was anonymous, but I hoped he'd understand. The next evening I saw him standing in front of it for a long, long time. He traced the outline of the paper with his finger, then turned and saw me watching. "Did you?" he started. "Yeah," I said, my throat tight. "It's us, I guess, or maybe who I hope we could be." He nodded, a tremble in his lip. "I like it." That was all he said, but it felt like everything. Summer had turned to autumn. The leaves on the cottonwood trees outside turned a brilliant gold and drifted against our windows. The rain came more often. Inside we created our own warmth with the crackling wood stove, shared blankets, and our charged proximity. I wanted to move forward too, deepen our connection, but Levi, still cautious, would pull back. We'd be on the couch and I'd try to lean in for a kiss, but he'd freeze, turning away gently. Or at night I might whisper his name and he'd mumble an excuse and retreat to his room. I understood the fear was a powerful current pulling him back to the safety of solitude. One day he was particularly quiet. After a long day at work, he didn't answer my texts. When he got home, he looked exhausted. I worried he regretted everything, that I'd misread his kindness for something more. That evening I cooked dinner, filling the small house with the smell of roasted chicken and garlic. I set two plates at our small table and called him from his room. He came into the kitchen, his face unreadable. "Food's ready," I said, trying to sound casual. He walked over but stopped a few feet from the table. He looked at me, his gaze intense. "Rowan, we need to talk." My stomach dropped. "Okay," he swallowed. "I like you a lot, I really do." He paused, looking down at the floorboards. "But I don't know if I'm ready for everything. I'm scared that if I let you in all the way, I'll break or I'll hurt you." "I'm scared too," I admitted, "but I want to try. We'll only go as far as you're comfortable." I reached out and touched his arm. "I care about you, Levi. If you need time." He looked at me, his eyes glistening. I've never done this before, never with someone I actually care about. It's easier to pretend I don't feel so much, easier to keep things simple." He gave a brittle, humorless laugh. "Fear of intimacy is a powerful thing. It pushes us behind walls of self-defense." Levi had built his walls high and thick, constructed from a lifetime of learned stoicism and quiet hurt, a friend's rejection, a father's casual homophobic jokes. Disguised as life advice, he carried all that armor. I listened, then I asked gently, "What is everything to you?" He paused, then spoke slowly. "Letting someone see my skin, letting someone touch me without flinching, letting someone know my desires without feeling ashamed, letting someone love me without me trying to control or contain it all." My heart ached because I wanted exactly that. I wanted to be the one he trusted enough to let those walls down for. Over the next few days we drifted. Sometimes we were close, sometimes distant. I gave him space when he needed it. I left him small notes: "Thinking of you, you are brave, I'm here." I tried not to smother him, but to simply be present. One cold evening we had to drive into town together. The ride in his old pickup was silent except for the crackle of the radio. Levi shivered. Without thinking, I took off my heavy shearling coat and draped it over his shoulders. His body pressed into mine, his breath quickened. I didn't push for more, I just asked, "Is this okay?" He nodded. After a few minutes he leaned in, resting his head softly on my shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a monumental offering of trust. Back at the house, he stood in the hallway, reluctant to part for our separate rooms. I said softly, I want you in my life, Levi, fully. Not just the parts you think are safe too. Show me, he looked at me, his eyes searching my face in the dim light. He stepped closer, I could see the pulse beating in his throat. He reached for me, and I closed the small gap between us. Pressing my forehead to his, we kissed. It was soft, trembling, and hesitant. It wasn't perfect, it was warm, kind, and unbearably honest. He pulled back slightly. Thank you, he whispered, for not giving up on me, and thank you, I replied, for being brave enough to try. I had my own struggles too. I questioned myself constantly. What if I wasn't enough? What if the weight of his fear became too much for me to carry? Loving someone who is still learning to love themselves is a heavy, beautiful burden. I felt exposed, wanting someone, needing someone opens you up to a world of hurt. Yet every time he gave me a real smile, one that reached his eyes, I felt a profound warmth spread through my chest. Every time he let me touch his arm or see a glimpse of his bare shoulders in the soft light, I felt honored. With each small act of trust, the barrier between us eased just a little more. One night we sat on the porch roof under a vast starry sky. Levi had wrapped a blanket around both of us. I handed him a mug of hot chocolate, the steam warming our cold hands. He sipped it, looking up at the Milky Way. Why did you stay that night? He asked quietly. The night you found me. Why didn't you run away? I smiled slightly. Because I like you, and because I think everyone deserves someone who doesn't run when they're at their most vulnerable. I paused. And because I hoped you might eventually let me in. He turned to me, his eyes shining in the moonlight. For a long moment I thought he would close himself off again. Then he whispered, I want to let you in. We kissed then, deeper than before, still restrained, but with more certainty. I could still feel his hesitation, but beneath it was a longing that matched my own. It was better than I could have imagined. Tension had been building for weeks. Wanting to protect him, the desire for him to heal, the hope for him to trust me fully, all crashing against his fear, his shame, the shadows of his past. That weekend, Levi said he needed to go home to his family's main ranch just for a couple of days. He said he needed to feel grounded. I hesitated. Was this him creating distance again, or making space to think? I agreed, dropping him off Friday evening. Driving back to our empty house, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a turning point. Saturday he sent a short text. Thanks for understanding. He sounded distant. I called later, but he didn't pick up. I left a message. I miss you, I'm here. Silence. On Sunday I couldn't stand it anymore. I drove to the cafe in the small town near his family's ranch and ordered his favorite, a black coffee. Strong and simple. I sat and watched the rain slick the empty streets. Then my phone buzzed. Can you come by? My heart hammered in my chest as I drove up the long gravel road to the main house. It was an old, formidable place, lit from within against the gray afternoon. His mother opened the door, gave me a polite, questioning smile, and let me in. Levi was in the living room. He looked different, less guarded, more weary, but with something firm and resolved in his eyes. His parents were out. We sat on the couch. Thank you for coming, he said. I tried to keep my voice steady. I'm here because I care. He nodded. I've been thinking, he said, about us, about how terrified I've been of being known, of being seen. He let out a long breath. Being here, it's safe in some ways, but it's also a cage. My mother asked me about girlfriends. My father reminded me of the family legacy. I feel like there's this path laid out for me, so when I started feeling this for you, it felt like a betrayal of who I thought I was supposed to be. Tear brimmed in his eyes, but it was also a betrayal of what I actually want. He turned to me, his voice breaking. I want to be honest with you, with myself. I reached for his hand. You can be. He pulled back slightly, brushing a tear from his cheek. I want to do this with you, everything, but I need you to know I have scars. The fear will creep in. I will panic sometimes. I'll pull back. I might need you to remind me that it's okay. I will. I nodded, my own throat tight. I promise. He looked at me, searching my face. And you have to trust me too, that I want this, not just when It's easy, but especially when it's hard. I trust you, I said, and then he closed the distance between us. We kissed in the dim light of his childhood home. It wasn't a kiss of perfect passion, it was hesitant, then deeper. Something raw and tender and true. Unfolding between us, I could taste the rain that had followed me here. Bitter coffee on his tongue, I felt his hand cut my cheek, his callous thumb stroking my skin. He paused, pulled back, and looked at me as if he were seeing me for the very first time. Rowan, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, being with you, it's the most real thing I've ever felt. The pressure, the fear, the longing, it all blossomed into that one moment. The truth was laid bare, love was stepping out of the shadows. We didn't rush, we just held each other, breathing together, letting the storm of emotions settle. It was intimate without needing to be physical, it was sensual in the way our fingers tangled together, in the warmth of absolute trust. Afterward, we talked for hours. He told me about his childhood, about the casual homophobic remarks from uncles that made him feel small and wrong, about the nights he cried himself to sleep believing he would be less of a man if he ever admitted who he was. I shared my own scars, my own fears. We found common ground in our quiet battles. We could be more than survivors, we could be builders. You've helped me feel brave, he said, squeezing my hand. Even now, I'm scared, but less so. You've always been brave, Levi, I told him. We left his parents' house and walked out into the rain, huddled under one umbrella. Our boots got soaked and we laughed. The sound real and unburdened. The air smelled of wet earth and new beginnings. He kissed me there under the yellow glow of a street light, rain falling all around us. This time it was mutual, wanted, and completely shared. After that weekend, things settled in a beautiful way. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of fear, missteps, and doubts, but our love began to put down quiet, firm roots. Back at our little house, the mornings felt warmer. I'd wake before him and make coffee, watching him sleep for a few minutes, listening to the steady rise and fall of his chest. He began staying in my room more often than retreating to his. We'd fall asleep side by side, our hands touching. We built new routines: Sunday morning pancakes, Saturday hikes into the high country, evenings spent journaling or sketching side by side. We talked honestly about our boundaries, our desires, and what we each needed to feel safe. One evening, Levi invited me to have dinner with a friend of his. My heart pounded. Meeting his friends as his partner was another step into the light. At a cozy bistro in town, he introduced me. This is Rowan, he said, his voice steady, and my heart soared. We walked home under the amber street lights, sharing my coat against the cold. Our fingers were intertwined. He stopped me on the sidewalk and looked at me. I love you, Rowan, I love you too, Levi, I said, my voice firm, my heart unruly. Levi's inner growth was gradual but profound. He learned self-compassion. He allowed me to see him cry. I learned to be patient, to offer comfort without solutions, to understand that loving someone sometimes means sitting with their discomfort and letting silence do the work. I grew too. His trust in me became a mirror, reflecting my own worth. Loving him made me braver. Months passed. Autumn gave way to winter. On a snowy evening, we went ice skating at the town rink. Lights were strung overhead, laughter echoed around us, and our breath plumed in the cold air. Levi slipped and I caught him. We fell together in a tangle of limbs, laughing, lying there on the ice and looking up at the spinning lights. I kissed him, and under the soft glow of the twinkling bulbs, he kissed me back with a warmth that defied the cold. When I think back to that rainy night, to the shame and vulnerability in Levi's eyes, I see now that it was the beginning of a journey, not just of physical closeness, but of emotional honesty, healing, and love. The real intimacy is in the vulnerability. The real romance is in the trust. We are together now, not as housemates, but as partners. We share dreams of art exhibits and cross-country road trips. We plan to talk to our families from a place of honesty and strength. Some will understand and some will take time. We're okay with an imperfect love, because our love is real. I see Now and he no longer hides, he walks. With his shoulders back, he holds my hand in public, he radiates a light that fear once dimmed, and I see a future I never thought was within my reach, to be fully myself, completely seen and wholly loved. Sometimes when the rain drums on the roof at night, I remember that first evening, I remember the fear in his eyes. And I remember offering a hand, and the trust that followed. That one small moment unlocked everything. We still have fears, but every day we choose to stay. We choose honesty, we choose each other. To everyone out there who feels unseen, who is afraid of being truly known, I hope you find someone who won't run away, someone who will hold your hand, hear your truth, and love your scars. You deserve to be safe, to be loved, to be seen. This is our story. Not because it's a fairy tale, but because it's real, because he was caught in his shame and he let me help him heal, and because I was caught in a moment of hope and I let love in.